The night she told me she couldn't handle my lifestyle anymore. The apartment felt smaller than it ever had. I remember the way the city lights flickered through the half-closed blinds, casting long, restless shadows across the room. She sat on the edge of the couch, fingers nervously twisting a loose thread on her sweater, eyes fixed somewhere between me and the floor. "I can't handle your wild lifestyle anymore," she said again, voice low but trembling. There was no anger in her tone, just an exhaustion I could almost touch. I nodded, slowly, deliberately. "I understand," I said, though my mind was racing in 1,000 directions. I understood perfectly she didn't want the chaos that came with me. The endless late nights, the sudden trips, the constant risk I took chasing my dreams. But understanding didn't make the words any easier to say, or the decision any less painful. We had met 3 years ago in a whirlwind of late-night bars, spontaneous weekend road trips, and ideas that only existed in caffeine-fueled conversations. She had been the steady heartbeat in my life, the calm to my storm, always there to remind me that the world didn't have to be conquered all at once. But life doesn't always give us the comfort of staying in one place, and my ambitions had grown faster than I had anticipated. That night, as I watched her try to reconcile her love for me with her fear of what our life together would become, I realized something crucial. I had to go, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because staying would mean asking her to live a life she never signed up for. And deep down, I knew that the life I wanted, a life of risk, creation, and unknown horizons, could include compromises that would chain me to someone else's fears. I packed my things quietly over the next week, careful not to make our last days together feel like a countdown to disaster. She offered to come with me, of course. But the moment she realized the life I was chasing wasn't just chaotic, was entirely unpredictable, she backed away. I respected her choice. Love wasn't about forcing someone into your world. It was about letting them walk away if they couldn't thrive there. The night before my flight, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the familiar hum of our apartment, replaying every argument, every laugh, every tender moment. And then the fear hit me, fear that leaving her behind might mean losing her forever, or worse, that she would see me succeed and regret not staying. I shoved the thought aside. Success wasn't guaranteed, and even if it came, it would mean little without the memory of what I had left behind. At dawn, I took a taxi to the airport. She was there, standing with her suitcase in the corner, hesitant but composed. We didn't hug, didn't kiss. The air was thick with unspoken words. She simply said, "Take care of yourself." I replied, "You too." And then I walked away, each step heavier than the last, until I disappeared into the crowd. The flight was long, and as the plane climbed into the clouds, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I was leaving behind not only my girlfriend, but the familiar rhythm of my life, the city streets, our favorite cafes, the friends who had become family. Everything was gone in a matter of hours, replaced by an empty seat next to me, a blank city waiting to be discovered. Landing in the new country was like stepping into another reality. Everything was strange, the language, the smells, the sounds. My ambitions suddenly seemed monumental, almost absurd. How could I build something meaningful in a place where I knew no one, where every face was unfamiliar and every word had to be deciphered? But I had a vision, and visions demand courage. I rented a small apartment, the kind with peeling paint and a view of a construction site across the street. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and it was a beginning. I spent days and nights sketching ideas, coding prototypes, and pitching to anyone who would listen. Rejection became my constant companion, yet I persisted, driven by a mixture of hope, stubbornness, and the memory of what I had left behind. Occasionally, I would check my phone, half expecting a message from her, a word of encouragement, or maybe even regret. But the silence was deafening. Some nights, the loneliness threatened to drown me. I missed her voice, her laughter, the way she could make the world seem smaller and warmer just by being in it. And yet, every time I thought of giving up or calling her, I reminded myself why I had left to pursue something greater than comfort. Something that neither of us could have if I hadn't taken the leap. Months blurred together in a whirlwind of work, failure, and small victories. I learned the nuances of the local market, adapted to the cultural quirks, and slowly began assembling a team of believers strangers who became my new family, bound not by history but by shared dreams. The city started to feel less alien. My work started to gain traction. And in those rare moments of quiet, when I looked out at the city lights and thought of her, I wondered if she ever regretted letting me go, or if she had moved on entirely. Yet, even as I buried myself in work, the memory of our time together remained vivid. The nights we spent planning future adventures, the arguments that ended in laughter, the comfort of knowing someone had your back. Those memories fueled me, reminding me that love and ambition aren't mutually exclusive, but sometimes they demand sacrifice. And so I kept building, one sleepless night at a time, driven by the dream that had taken me halfway across the world. Leaving her had been the hardest choice of my life, but it was also the only choice that allowed me to fully step into the person I was meant to become. I didn't know it then, but the first chapter of my life abroad was about more than business. It was about discovering resilience, embracing solitude, and realizing that some love stories are meant to inspire growth rather than comfort. The first few months were brutal. Every day felt like climbing a mountain barefoot, with obstacles appearing just as I thought I had a rhythm. Investors dismissed me as naive. My team, though passionate, was inexperienced, and cultural misunderstandings often slowed progress. I spent long nights at my desk, staring at lines of code, financial projections, and marketing strategies, wondering if I had made a colossal mistake, leaving everything behind. But amidst the struggle, there were sparks of hope. One evening, as rain streaked down the windows of my tiny apartment, I received an email from a potential investor who had actually read my pitch with interest. His questions were pointed, testing my knowledge and commitment. But he ended with a phrase that made my heart leap. "This has potential. Let's talk." That moment felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. A glimmer that all the sacrifices might be worth it. Building the startup was more than just work. It was a test of endurance, intellect, and emotional control. I learned to negotiate with people who didn't speak my language perfectly, to motivate my team when their confidence wavered, and to pivot strategies when markets shifted unexpectedly. Each small victory, each solved problem, added a layer of confidence. I began to see myself not just as a dreamer, but as someone capable of transforming vision into reality. Still, the personal cost was undeniable. I barely slept, missed meals, and neglected friendships back home. There were nights when exhaustion and loneliness merged into a single, oppressive weight. I would sometimes imagine her in her familiar routines, wondering if she missed me, or if our life had continued without me, mundane but comfortable. The thought stung, but I refused to dwell to long distraction with survival. Yet, despite the hardships, moments of beauty emerged unexpectedly. I discovered local cafes where the baristas began remembering my name. I found quiet streets lined with cherry blossoms that reminded me of the city I had left behind. I met other expatriates, fellow dreamers, who shared the same mix of ambition and desperation. In them, I found camaraderie, empathy, and the strange comfort of knowing I wasn't completely alone. As the months passed, my startup began to take shape. Early prototypes turned into functional products. Small sales turned into repeat customers. The investor who had first believed in me introduced me to a network that opened doors I hadn't thought possible. Every step forward was hard-won, but the sense of accomplishment was intoxicating. I could feel the momentum building beneath my fingers like a living thing, propelling me forward even on the darkest days. There were moments of temptation to seek comfort, to call her and ask if we could try again, or even just to hear her voice. But I resisted. I had learned that the pursuit of a dream demands focus, and that love, when intertwined with fear and hesitation, could not exist in half measures. I couldn't build a future if I was constantly looking backward. Still, I allowed myself brief indulgences of memory. Sometimes I would walk through a park at sunset and recall her laugh echoing in the apartment. Sometimes I would find a song on the radio that reminded me of our first trip together, and a pang of longing would hit me unexpectedly. These memories, bittersweet and sharp, became fuel. They reminded me of the stakes, of what was waiting for me if I succeeded, of the cost of leaving comfort behind. Challenges were relentless. Technical glitches, supply chain delays, and regulatory hurdles threatened to undo months of work overnight. Investors doubted my leadership at times, and team morale faltered when setbacks hit hard. Each day was a balance between problem-solving and emotional resilience. I learned to stay calm when everything seemed to be collapsing, to listen more than I spoke, and to celebrate the smallest victories as though they were monumental. By the end of the first year, we had launched our product. Sales were modest but promising. It wasn't yet the multi-million-dollar success I had dreamed of, but it was proof that the risk had been worthwhile. I remember sitting alone in the office one night, looking at the numbers and realizing that we had survived the impossible. That moment, quiet and uncelebrated, felt like the first real taste of triumph. As my reputation grew, so did the pressure. Media outlets began noticing the startup. Invitations to speak at conferences arrived. Competitors started to take notice. The world I had entered was no longer foreign. It was mine to navigate. And yet, even as my professional life soared, a part of me ached for what I had left behind. Late one night, months after the initial launch, I received a message. It was brief, almost casual. "I see what you've built. I was wrong to leave. Can we talk?" My heart raced. I hadn't expected this, not now. Not after all the struggles and sacrifices. I didn't reply immediately. I stared at the screen, weighing the emotional risk against the hard-earned independence I had fought for. The message was a reminder that the past never fully disappears, even when you try to outrun it. I realized then that the journey wasn't just about business. It had been about learning who I was without the comfort of familiarity, about discovering that ambition demands isolation, courage, and sometimes heartbreak. Each setback, each sleepless night, each lonely meal had shaped me into someone capable of confronting not only the challenges of the business world, but also the complexities of the heart. I didn't know how the story with her would unfold, if it would at all. But I did know one thing. I had grown into someone who could stand alone, who could pursue dreams without compromise, and who understood that love and success sometimes arrive on different timelines. The months abroad had changed me, forged me in ways I hadn't anticipated, and prepared me for a future where nothing could be taken for granted. Not success, not love, not the choices that define a life. The morning the news broke that our startup had crossed the multi-million-dollar mark, I was in my office, staring at the dashboard in disbelief. Numbers that had once felt like distant dreams now glowed on the screen like a testament to every sleepless night, every failure, every lonely decision. I felt a surge of triumph, yes, but also a strange emptiness, because success had arrived without her. The thought of her flooded my mind like a ghost, a reminder of what I had sacrificed to reach this point. Almost immediately, my phone began buzzing. Messages, missed calls, emails, all from her. I can't believe what you've done. I was wrong. Can we meet? I see now what you always knew you were destined for this. I'm so sorry. Each one chipped at the carefully constructed armor I had built over months of independence. The woman who had once told me she couldn't handle my lifestyle was now reaching out, drawn to the life I had created without her. I stared at the messages for hours, feeling a mixture of anger, nostalgia, and longing. There was a temptation to reply, to let the old rhythm of comfort and familiarity sweep over me. But I had learned something crucial during my months abroad. Love is not just about desire. It is about respect for oneself and for the choices that define who you are. Could I let her back in after walking away, after watching her hesitate when the risk was real? Could I trust that her interest was genuine, or was it merely drawn to my success? I decided to meet her, not out of weakness, but to confront the emotions I had tucked away for so long. The cafe where we agreed to meet was the same type of place we had once loved, quiet, with a soft hum of conversation around us. She arrived first, looking nervous but composed, eyes scanning the room until they found me. For a moment, neither of us spoke, just sat there, the weight of months of absence stretching between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, tinged with regret. I should have trusted you. I didn't realize how strong you were, or how much you could accomplish if left to your own devices. Her words were sincere, and I wanted to believe them. I wanted to feel the warmth we had once shared, but experience had tempered my heart. I had grown. I was no longer the man who would bend to the ease of her comfort. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But a lot has changed since then. I'm not the same person you left behind. She nodded, swallowing hard, understanding or at least sensing that the years apart had forged a new version of me, one who could no longer exist in the safe boundaries of the past. We talked for hours, walking through memories, acknowledging the mistakes, and revealing the growth we had each achieved in our absence. She admitted her fear of my ambition, of the chaos she could not control, and I admitted my fear of losing myself for the sake of someone else's comfort. The conversation was cathartic, painful, and necessary, peeling back layers of old feelings while revealing new truths. By the end of the meeting, a strange clarity had emerged. We both acknowledged our love, but we also recognized that love alone could not erase months of separation, personal growth, and the lessons we had each learned. She had matured too, and I could see her admiration for the path I had taken. But admiration was not a foundation for the life we once imagined together. Returning to my apartment that evening, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I had confronted the past, sorrow that love sometimes arrives too late, or at least not in the way one expects. Success had changed the equation. It had taught me that life's victories are hollow if not balanced with authenticity, self-respect, and emotional wisdom. The following weeks were filled with reflection. I focused on my team, on refining the product, on scaling operations to meet growing demand. Every email, every investor call, every marketing campaign reminded me that I had built something extraordinary, not just in financial terms, but in proof of my resilience, vision, and independence. The knowledge that I could thrive alone, pursue my ambitions, and still maintain the capacity for love gave me a newfound confidence I had never known. Eventually, she stopped contacting me. The messages faded, replaced by a quiet acknowledgement that some relationships cannot survive the intersection of growth and timing. And strangely, I felt a sense of peace rather than loss. I had loved her deeply, and she had loved me, but our paths had diverged in ways that demanded courage, honesty, and sacrifice. Success had not brought her back, but it had brought me Qley, lesson in the power of perseverance and the complexity of the human heart. Looking out at the skyline from my office, I understood that the story of love and ambition is rarely linear. It is messy, painful, and unpredictable. But it is in that mesiosis that true growth occurs. I had chased a dream, built something incredible, and in doing so, discovered that self-respect and integrity often matter more than reconciliation, more than the comfort of familiarity. And as I watched the city lights flicker in the distance, I realized that the woman who had once left me behind would always be a part of my story, but she would no longer define its ending. The life I had built, the successes I had achieved, and the lessons I had learned were mine alone. I had stepped into the unknown, faced the chaos of my ambition, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakably grounded in the understanding that love, when it comes too late, is not always enough to rewrite the past. The journey had been painful, exhilarating, lonely, and transformative. It had taught me that growth often demands leaving behind what is familiar, that success is earned in silence and struggle, and that the heart is capable of both longing and resilience. And as I continued to build, innovate, and dream, I carried those lessons with me, proof that some sacrifices, no matter how painful, are necessary for the life we are meant to lead.